I lost my job at 56. Telling my wife made me feel like I'd let her down. Not because of anything she said, but because of everything I believed I was supposed to be. The provider, the one who keeps everything stable. Sitting down with her and saying those words out loud, that's when it becomes real. Here's what the conversation was actually like. Before I even had that conversation, I felt like I'd already failed. Everything I thought defined me as a husband, as a man, threatened by a 15-minute Zoom call. They had given me two options: take a performance improvement plan or take severance and leave. Either way, the provider identity felt stripped away, and now I had to tell the person who depended on me about this impossible choice. Maybe you know that weight, that feeling of walking to a conversation you don't want to have, where you have to admit that everything just changed, where you have to share uncertainty when you're supposed to provide stability. The fear wasn't just about the decision, it was about disappointing the person who believed in you, about not being the rock you promised to be. It took me an hour and a half before I could have that conversation with her. I needed time to think through the options, to realise I was being pushed out either way, to find the words. This was Wednesday afternoon, about 90 minutes after they had given me the ultimatum: performance improvement plan or severance. We had a contractor working in the house at the time, and I remember thinking how great the timing was to have this crisis just as we were having work being done. During those 90 minutes, it became quite apparent to me that I was being pushed out. If I took the PIP, there was a 99% chance it would push me out anyway, and I would lose any offer of severance. I took my wife outside, where we could talk privately, away from the noise and the workers. I said, I need to tell you something. They gave me two options today: take a performance improvement plan or take severance and leave. I've decided to take the severance. She was visually shocked by the news. At first, she thought I was joking, but she could see from the expression on my face that I obviously was not. The shock settled in quietly. Then came her immediate concern. Are you okay? What happened? Not panic about money, not fear about the future. Her first instinct was to worry about me, not the situation. Then came the practical questions. What exactly led to this? How much severance? How long will this last? What about health insurance? But even those questions felt like problem solving together. Not blame, not panic. Just, okay, this is happening. What do we do now? Here's why telling her about this choice was emotionally harder than receiving the ultimatum itself. It made the crisis real for both of us. When it's just you can pretend you might find a way to make the PIP work. You can tell yourself maybe it won't be as bad as it seems. But sitting there explaining to your partner why you're choosing to leave, that's when you can't hide from the reality anymore. Maybe you felt that too. That moment when your private crises become shared reality. When you have to be vulnerable at exactly the moment you're supposed to be strong. I felt like I had failed my fundamental role, not just as an employee, but as a husband. The weight wasn't about the choice, it was about bringing this uncertainty into our life together. And I didn't have all the answers. I couldn't say, don't worry, I've got this handled, because I was making the best decision I could with impossible options. But here's what actually happened. She gave me complete and absolute support. She understood immediately why I couldn't take the PIP. She could see it was a setup, that they were pushing me out either way. When I told her I wanted to focus on building this YouTube channel instead of immediately looking for another corporate job, she didn't hesitate. She said she didn't want me to go back to corporate anyway. She would rather have me try something I actually cared about. That's belief. That's partnership. That's someone who sees your potential when you're questioning everything about yourself. What I learned is that the fear I was carrying, that was mine, not hers. The idea that my worth as a husband was tied to staying in a job that didn't want me, that was my belief, not hers. The conversation I had been dreading became the moment we started facing this together, instead of me facing it alone. She saw me as her partner, making difficult but necessary decisions, not as someone who had failed her. If you're facing this conversation right now with your spouse, your partner, your family, about impossible choices at work, I know how heavy it feels. You may feel shame, but you're probably being too hard on yourself, especially if you're being pushed out, if you're facing ageism, if the options they're giving you aren't really options at all. You're not losing your value as a partner by making the best choice from bad options. You're not losing your identity by refusing to accept unacceptable treatment. That conversation doesn't define you. How you handle what comes next, together, that's what matters. The person that loves you wants to face this with you, not have you face it alone. Cheers.
Empower over 50 now. Stand up tall and take your bow. Feel the rhythm, feel the power. This is your triumphant hour.